Welcome to the Brave Parenting Podcast, an examination of the Bible and how parents can apply God's Word to raising children in a culture saturated with media and technology. I am your host, the founder of Brave Parenting, Kelly Newcomb. Well, hey there, everyone. So glad you're here. Today, I'm excited to share an interview with you with Michelle Lazor. She is a fellow Brave parent from our community, and you're going to love her. First off, because she is the mother of 10 biological children. Incredible. You're going to love her story. And Michelle operates an online bookstore called Mud Hen Mama, which is a carefully curated selection of books that help specifically guide families to teach and uphold biblical truth and values. I was just talking to a group of moms who were expressing the frustration about how their kids get into a series of books, and then like maybe book 8 or something, that all of a sudden there's an LGBTQ theme in there, or just something so unnecessary that requires, a lot of conversation and redirection when it just was unnecessary. Well, you're not going to have to worry about that with this curated list. You can find books for all ages and even yourself. So it was really great. Now, if you've been listening to the Brave Parenting Podcast for any amount of time, you know that I'm super passionate about reading books. It is usually the very first thing that goes to screen time and technology. Whereas reading books builds character and intelligence, and screen time pretty much does the reverse. So reading books is not something we ever want to allow to just easily slip out of our kids' lives and be replaced by something as mind-numbing as video games. So here is what I love about Michelle and her website, Mud Hen Mama. Not only is she a passionate follower of Christ, but by using her website instead of Amazon, not only are you going to be assured that you're getting wholesome and biblically aligned books, but you're going to be supporting a Christian business. You are supporting a sister in Christ and her mission to just be a resource to parents because she's already gone ahead and done the work of vetting all of these books. So now listen, I know that Amazon is faster and easier, but that's also why I say we need a little more friction in our lives because it's almost too convenient. We tend to appreciate things more if we have to invest a little more energy into it, especially when we know that we are supporting a company that aligns with our values, that doesn't necessarily hate us as Christians. So I really encourage you to check out Michelle's website. It's mudhenmama.com. And at the end, she will be announcing this, but I kind of wanted to include it in the beginning as well. They are kindly offering our listeners 10% off your order with the code BRAVE Parenting. So that's 2 words, BRAVE, and then parenting. You get 10% off your order. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into my interview with Michelle and hear her story about Mud Hen Mama. Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for joining us on the Brave Parenting Podcast. Go ahead and tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Kelly. I'm very excited to be on today. So a little background about me. So I guess the biggest thing is that we do have 10 children, and they're all ours.
10 children.
10 children. So our oldest is 23, and she actually has a baby. It's sort of funny. So she's married, and on her wedding day, I was actually pregnant with our youngest, who is now 2. So yeah, and our granddaughter is just about a month old now. She's almost 2 months, which is crazy. So, and yeah, we had children more or less between 2 to 3 years apart, down the from 23 down to our 2-year-old. So yeah, we're very busy. Currently, I say that we have 10, but technically right now we only have 7 in our home because our daughter's obviously married, so she's out of the house, and then we have 2 in college. But in the summer times anyway, it's always very, very busy. So it's such a blessing. It definitely was not in our when we first got married. Dan and I were married. I've been married now for 26 years, my husband. And when we first got married, it was definitely not something that we had ever contemplated. We wanted to have children, but God had definitely other plans. I don't know how far into our life you want me to go into, but we had 2 children. I actually was working at the time. I really wanted my career to work. I was a chemical engineer, very excited about getting my degree. And then I had our first daughter, and a lot changed. My perspective very much changed, and I thought, oh wow, I actually want to be home. And I never ever. I was definitely more. I had more of a feminist slant. I really wanted to embrace just being a working mom. That's how I grew up, and that's how I just thought I would do things. And so that was definitely our first wake up call, as to, we're going to do things a little bit differently. And the way we were able to figure that out, because obviously, like I said, we were both working. My husband was actually a teacher, and we were in the DC area, and we're like, this is never going to work. Like, I have to work. There's no way we could survive. So, and we both really loved international stuff. We thought, my husband actually went to Hungary for a short missions trip, and he thought, I think we need to be overseas. And I thought, okay, that's great, but I have no idea what that's going to look like, how we would make it work. But, in God's sovereignty, we, looking up stuff on the internet, and we found the Network of International Christian Schools. And it was a ton of different events that happened, and we ended up in South Korea, in Seoul. At the time, we had two children. Our second one was just turning a year old when we arrived in Korea. And it was it's funny, because we thought, okay, I'm Hispanic, and I really wanted to be in the Spanish speaking country. It would be great to have our kids learn Spanish, and in the culture, all that stuff. And we ended up in a place that neither one of us had on our radar at all. Neither one of us had an affinity towards Asian culture at all. I mean, it's not that we didn't like it, we just never really thought of going there. And God decided otherwise, and we really loved it. Korea was just such a blessing to our family. We had 4 more children there. And no, they're not citizens. Everyone always asks that. America is very special. That's America's probably one of, I'm sure there are other countries, but very few countries actually have birthright citizenship. But anyway, so they're not citizens. But yeah, it was a place of great growth. My husband started off as a teacher, and then he ended up as a principal of the elementary school. And then when we found that our time was pretty much coming to an end, we thought, okay, we still wanted to stay overseas. And what ended up happening was we didn't know where we were going. And so that was when our last year we were there, I actually homeschooled for that year. And then because I thought, well, this is going to be a time where it's going to be just a place of learning, because if we're in a rougher area and, we're just starting off a school or something, that I want to know how to homeschool. And so this is going to be a good start for us. And so homeschooled, ended up coming back to the United States, and an opportunity came up in England. And so through the Network of International Christian Schools, it's just, that's sort of like the parent organization, and they have lots of different schools all over the world. And so they didn't have a school in England, and we thought, oh, this is perfect. We're so excited about it. Shipped all of our stuff over there to England, and we were there, and we realized very quickly that that was not going to work. And it was an incredibly difficult time. We were pregnant with baby 7. And we ended up having to come back home right around this time, actually, maybe in a month. It was right around Thanksgiving. It was a very, very difficult time in our lives. But God was faithful. God was very faithful, even though I was very angry at the time. We were trying to decide whether or not we were going to go to Wisconsin so Midwest, or to New Jersey, which is where we're at. And I knew how expensive New Jersey was, and how much more practical it seemed as if to go to live in Wisconsin. I'm from the Midwest area. It's from, I told you earlier, from Chicago area. So I thought, oh, I know this area, and this is going to be great. But my husband is from Scranton, Pennsylvania. And so that was, all of his family was out here. And so, but despite that, I just thought, well, how are we going to make this work? This is impractical. But he wanted to come here for lots of different reasons. Long story short, we ended up coming here, and I'm so thankful that we ended up landing here. A lot of different things happened. One of them, my father passed away, and we were close to family, so they were able to help us. And and just life in general, like the community here has been a huge blessing to our family. So I'm so thankful that we are here. It was definitely, I came personally kicking and screaming, not happy about it, but God has been so faithful. So we had we came in January. to New Jersey. We had our baby Seven in February, so you can imagine how crazy that was. And then a few years later, we had twins, and then yeah, a few years after that, then we had our last one, which is she's 2 right now. So yeah, so it's been quite crazy, but God is so good.
Wow. Okay. So that was amazing. That is quite the story. That was more than I knew before. We have talked before, but that was more than I knew. And I think that's such a breath of fresh air for other parents who are listening to this podcast to just hear your trajectory, your story, and just that's really the epitome of brave parenting, man. You're just going through it, having children, no matter what God brings you and where. That's quite a testimony and quite a story. So
Well, praise
let's,
God for
but
that. And I don't think I'm sorry, just really quickly, because I said that we had never planned on having a large family, and that's something else that was just such a God thing. After baby number 4, we thought we were so done, and it ended up that we had a friend that had similar age kids. They were on baby 5, but they had a set of twins earlier, so that's why they had 5. And I just remember asking her, you're done, right? I mean, I'm sure you've got to be done because God help you, like that's a lot of kids. You have 5 kids. And she just said, "Oh, I don't know." And it was that answer. I'll never forget that answer because it was just such a, just being open-handed with the Lord. And I just never even, I never contemplated that sort of an answer. And it was from that point, we both my husband and I were praying so much about it, and we decided, okay, Lord, we're just going to let you be in control of this. And not that I've written about this, not that everyone has to, come to that same conclusion to be faithful, but I think it's just being open-handed and trusting God with whatever the Lord gives you, and praying it through. And so that's where God brought our family. And that's why we have such a large family. Because I come from a very small family. It was just me and my brother. And my husband comes from a larger family. He had 4 siblings, so there was 5 of them. But yeah, so we're definitely an anomaly. But just so thankful and just so grateful that God brought us, to this point. So
and that's an important point because it somewhat mirrors a little bit of our story in the sense of we just kind of said, okay, Lord, I don't think I can handle these more adopted kids. And so we said, oh, just one more. We'll adopt a teenager. And then as soon as we adopted a teenager, it was like, but wait, there's 4 more siblings, that are left in foster care. And we just open-handedly said, okay, I don't think I can do it. I'm sure you probably said, I don't know. I don't know if I can do this. I think I'm done. That was
yes.
definitely our thought as well. But the Lord is so good. And I love the fact that he can not only use us as moms, as parents of many children, to not only minister to those kids, but to do things for others, for the body of Christ as a whole. It is a gift from God to be able to not only me lead Brave Parenting, but you lead Mudhead Mama. And we're going to talk about that. But I think it's really important. We have this great opportunity to talk about raising 10 kids, which most of them, if not, at least the first half, are what we would call Gen Z, your
Yeah.
23-year-old down to, I think age 14, 15 is kind of like now where they
Okay.
cut off at Gen Alpha. But nonetheless, you were doing the same thing as me because my oldest is 28 now, but still all of that media and technology revolution. So how
Yeah.
did you handle, maybe it was different because you were in South Korea for some of that, but how did you handle media and technology while you were raising and discipling your kids?
I've thought a lot about this, and because sometimes I think, well, we had a lot of like I'm not going to remember those little like the Game Boys and stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
we did have other media, and our kids definitely. It was a fight then too for our I mean now our older kids. So the top half are Gen Z then, and they. And even when I was thinking back in my childhood, I also had we also had all of those electronic devices. But what's different is it seems as if the culture is more hostile towards our values, and so there's
Hmm.
just stuff that's I think being filtered in very subtly, and that's the biggest difference is that I feel like we're fighting a lot more because our kids are more of a our kids are more openly a target. Maybe it wasn't as blatant before, but I think now it's much more just aggressively like attacking our children, or like tempting our children to,
Sure.
watch different things, be more distracted, all of that. And I mean, I find myself struggling with it too. I'm praying all the time, Lord God, help me, put my phone down and help me to be present, because it's it really is like a drug. Like it's hard to put it down. And I think a couple things that we've done have been definitely helpful. We don't allow phones until our children are in high school. That was a hard no for us. It was a little hard for a couple of our kids to, because they definitely wanted the phone a little earlier. But I mean, we did allow our kids to use my phone, so they would text their friends, but they didn't have something that they could have on their own, like carry around with them. And the other hard line that we drew is all of the phones had to be downstairs charging, so they couldn't take them up into their room and keep them. And I think that's also a really important line that you have to draw. We could be a little loosey goosey about some other things, like our younger sometimes can be on electronics longer than they should be, or they're playing games, and but I do think that having the internet at your fingertips is very, very the danger is just more elevated, and so we have to be so much more careful with that. That's my opinion. And, especially compared to my older kids, like it just wasn't even something that we had to contemplate. We more had to, think about, okay, let's not be playing these games, but not like, exploring and, checking out social media or whatever. And actually, that's the other thing, is that we've tried to be very careful with social media. So we had allowed 16 and up, those kids, so our top 4, they did have social media, but our 14-year-old, much to her annoyance, is not getting social media. And that's for a few different reasons, but also reading Anxious Generation, I think, has really been eye-opening, and just knowing that it's just such an issue that we need to be really diligent about, like putting those boundaries around her for her own protection. That's what we've decided to do for her. Some of it I know we'll probably revisit it maybe when she's around 16, is I think what we said, that we would allow her the Instagram, but no TikTok, no that was a hard no for like pretty much everybody. No TikTok, but Instagram is the big one that all the kids want. But it's hard. It's hard to know, because you don't want necessarily to go to the extreme of a flip phone, although I do see a lot of value in doing that. But it's also having that balance, and also just helping them to figure it out, because this is always going to be in front of them. Like, this is not something that's going to go away anytime soon. Like, kids are going to have these phones, so how do you use it with wisdom, and how do you navigate it with in a way that they can that we can feel okay with them having it. I don't know. It's definitely hard. I mean, I feel like I have 10 kids, but I mean, as I'm sure every child is so different. And so, you have to parent each child a little bit differently, and you're never really fully an expert, because they're all so stinking different. And you just pray. I think it's sort of it's beautiful to know that the Lord is always with you, and you can always come to God and just ask for wisdom, because it's never like if you do A, you will get B and C. That's just not how it works, so, or at least generally that's not how it works. So anyway, just praying and asking the Lord for wisdom.
So would you say, when you're 20, who's now 23, when they were like 13, and I have a 23-year-old, so I know exactly what the kind of how I felt, at least here in Texas at that time. The pressure to give every kid a phone was so great, and no one was pushing back.
Yes.
No one was like, no, why would you not give your, 5th, 6th grader, a smartphone? It really felt like that. And so now, I mean, so fast forward, all these years later, 10 years later, now, do you feel a big difference to how you're going to parent the second half of your kids, your Gen Alpha kids, compared to how you did the first?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is going to be no social media. Like what we did with our 14-year-old is probably going to be passed down. But we really felt strongly about that. I mean, you could see it was amazing even in Korea because we came back to the United States when our daughter was, I think, 12. Yeah, she was 12 years old and she didn't have a phone. And that was hard. But it sort of helped, and I'm sure you can appreciate this. When you have 7 kids, when you have 10 kids, you're already a weirdo, right? So I was like, well, oh well, you're going to continue to be a weirdo, and you're just going to have to suck it up, and um, you're not going to have a phone. I'm sorry, and that was sort of helpful, I guess. I don't know. It was sort of built-in weirdness and built-in like, oh, you're not going to do the same thing that everybody else is going to do, but yeah, I mean, I think that the other biggest thing though that we would definitely continue to do anyway is like the holding back the social media. And we do have, I forgot to mention this, we do have like time limits on all of the devices.
Hmm.
So if they were on even like YouTube or anything like that, like they have a specific time, and if they want to have more time, they have to ask me. And so then, at that point, obviously I'm like, okay, well, what are you watching? What are you doing? And so, I think that's also been really helpful. My husband set all those things up on the phone. So
Yeah. Yeah. My kids had the like triple whammy weirdo effect. Not only were they one of seven, they were adopted, and their mom led a ministry against like smartphones and social media. So it was like, yeah, sorry. But now the beauty is they're all adults and they all have different sort of lives that they lead online. Some are not online at all, but most of them are all like, yeah, you're right. I mean,
oh
you're
yeah,
right. Like
for
they
sure,
leave the
for sure.
home, they get all the access that they want, and they know immediately, oh, this is why. I have my one son who says, if you would have allowed this, I would have been a mess. I would have gotten myself into so much trouble. Knowing now what I know is out there, he's like, I would have gotten into all of the wrong stuff and been a totally different person. So, for that's why we call it brave parenting, because you just literally have to do that hard work. And it's hard every single day. Cause like you said, I'm sure your 14-year-old pushes back
Yeah,
so hard because they see everyone else, and they especially see older siblings who may have had it, and it doesn't seem fair, but man, the fruit and the reward will come
yeah.
when you
Oh,
continue
for
to do the hard
sure.
work.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things. It's like you have to stand your ground. And it's the hardest thing. I mean, honestly, I just feel like, okay, God, this is how I see how you force me to just constantly be in prayer, because
Yeah.
I can't do it on my own. I don't,
Amen.
I don't want to be the mean mom. I don't want to be the weird mom or anything like that. But I want to be the righteous mom. I want to be the godly mom. I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to, um, allow things to happen that one day I will regret or they will
That's right.
regret. And so it's like, okay, God, let's give me the strength to say no. And I haven't always been perfect. I'll be honest,
None of
but
us are.
yeah, but I think that God has been faithful. And so
Yeah.
he strengthens me when I know I just need to stand firm and, just say no. And then that's a real no. Like I'm not moving on that, so,
Yeah.
um, God is faithful, but I think we also have to be, we have to like step forward in faith, and then he will give us the strength to continue to stand. And but it's hard. It's always going to be hard,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. I always say there's so much purpose though in that struggle.
Yes.
It's the Christian
Hmm.
life is not necessarily meant to be easy.
Yes.
And God sovereignly ordained that we parent in this generation, this time and space in our Christian walk. And He will totally equip us to do the work. He's not surprised that all of this online media content is swaying our kids into so much sin, temptation, and really just despair. He knew it, and He's prepared us in advance. So, one more personal question before we kind of move on, because I really am excited to talk about your ministry that you do. But just for parents, as a mom, I know you're not an expert, as you said, none of us really are, but what is your best practice for raising and discipling your children to know and love the Lord in this culture that's saturated with media and technology? What kind of practices do you guys do in your home with so many kids?
Hmm. What we try to do, and we're not always consistent with this either, but we do try to do Bible study. And I love that sometimes our kids will actually even remind us, like, hey, we have zero Bible study tonight, and it's not long. We'll just read maybe a chapter in. We've bopped around all around the Bible, but it's just trying to be consistent um and reading God's word. So that's one thing that we always do, and I think we always just try to incorporate God in whatever we do. I mean, my kids get annoyed at me, but I'll say, have you prayed about it? Have you, just really having it be, it's not something that we just do on Sundays, I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
you know that, but it's something that is an everyday thing. God is here. How, what do we, how do we do this? I don't know. Let's pray. Let's, you guys are being psycho. Okay, I'm going to pray. I mean, and like even it's just funny. Like my kids are like, oh no, mom's praying right now because I'll just, oh Lord God, and I'm just like rubbing my hands over my face like Jesus help me right now. And that's something that actually I always tell my kids that too. Like if you don't know what to say, what do you do? And just pray Jesus help me. I'm like 3 words. That's all you
Mm-hmm.
got to do is and just really trying to incorporate as much of Christ into our lives without it being like rather than it being just sort of shoved in. It's more of a natural thing,
Sure.
that we're not going to we're not going to be pretend, not that we're going that we would ever, or that people intentionally want to be pretend Christians, but it's not something that we like shove in. It's something that is just a part of who we are, and it's part of who they are. I mean, that's, I want them above all their identity to be in Christ, not in what they look like, or what sport they play, or how good they do in school. It's about Christ, and their
Yeah.
identity is in him. And so that's what we try, we just try to talk about, like have it be as natural as possible, and talk about what, okay, what did you guys think of the sermon today, when we're driving back from church, and just talking about things like that. So I think that's been helpful.
And do you homeschool now, or how are the kids
No,
educated?
no. So when we came back to the United States and we were in New Jersey, my husband got a job at a Christian school, and so he's the middle school principal at a school here, and so all of our kids, they had to go to the school. It's been wonderful. I say that with like a little hesitation in the sense of like, yes, we were forced to do it, but I'm also like, that was God's hand of providence, and they've been very happy there, and it's been a blessing for sure. But it wasn't my initial my choice. I would have loved to have continued to homeschool them, but it
To
just
homeschool.
wasn't on the table. It wasn't something that I could choose. So the Lord had to rip that one out of my hands too. And but I just know that God's ways are better. So I just had to relent, and yeah, and it's been good. I mean, I'm thankful they've been able to do so much more, at least more activities than I probably could have done if we were only homeschooling. So
Yeah.
God knew better. So yeah, unfortunately, so we only had that year and a half of homeschooling. However, because of that year and a half of homeschooling, so now we could talk about, if that's okay to talk about Mudhead Mama.
Yes.
That's what actually helped me to figure out like that this is what I wanted to do, is because during that time, that just year and a half of homeschooling, I discovered all of these amazing books that were only, I had never seen them before, but it was because they were all a part of, I think we'd started off with Charlotte Mason. And so there were all these book, titles that were recommended. And a bunch of them, I was like, I've never even heard of these titles. Why aren't they more popular in Christian circles? And so I thought, this would be so great for Christians to know that these books are available, not just to the homeschooling community, but to everyone, to all the Christian, families. And so it was something that was sort of planted in the back of my head. And then 2020 happened. And a lot of things, I think, came to the surface that, I had sort of been aware of some things, but just in general with like books and, what was happening culturally, and the melding of those two. But I don't think I fully understood. And so with 2020 happening and all of the cultural havoc, I really started, like I had noticed, Scholastic, for example. Scholastic, the school would have Scholastic flyers come in, and I thought, wow, a lot of these books are just like Cheetos for the brain. I always have my food analogies. They're not bad necessarily. They're just not that great, and they're just they're not really edifying at all. And but then I realized I noticed that a lot of people were talking about there were things that were being slipped into some of these books that were not, it wasn't just that they were Cheetos for the brain, they were poison for the brain. So, and for their hearts and their souls and their spirits. And so knowing that, I just thought, there's got to be an alternative. There's got to be something else that, families should be able to go to know that, okay, these books are good books, and, they don't have to worry about them. So that's why I started Mud Hen Mama. The name actually comes from, again, going back to homeschooling. I was looking for a name of a business that I could use, and everything that I could think of was just taken, or it just didn't sound right. So I was praying about it, and the Lord reminded me of these set of books that I had from when we homeschooled, and it was books that just talked about different animals that had attributes of the Lord, of God. So one of them I was looking through, and what I came across the American Coot, and the American Coot is the nickname is Mud Hen. And what they would do is that when they felt threatened by their enemy, they would look up and squawk they would come together and squawk at the enemy, and try to scare the enemy away. And so that's sort of what I felt like I was trying to do. I wanted to get together other Christian families to squawk against the enemy, because I think individually, first of all, you can't fight them off individually. And second of all, when we're together, we're more aware of what's happening, and we're more protected. And so that's what I wanted to be able to offer to families, is like, look, this is happening, and you need to be aware, and you need to understand how to approach this from a biblical worldview. These are all amazing books that could be super helpful to you, and whether that's for your child or for yourself as a parent. And so initially we did start off only with children's books. So we only had, I think it was between 50 and 100 titles, not very many titles at all. But, I started approaching schools and just saying, hey, would you guys be interested in having a book fair with us? And now we have over 2,500 titles. So we have a ton more. And obviously now we have not just for children, we have pre-K through adults. And so all of the books have been vetted to have a biblical worldview, or to not conflict with the biblical worldview. Not all the books are preaching the gospel, which is something that I always want to make clear. It's not that not every book is going to be claiming Jesus as Lord and Savior, but they are all sharing something that's good, beautiful, and true. And I think that kids can learn a lot from classics that may not necessarily be preaching the gospel, but they're teaching something, like some values that are really important to understand. Or history, I think that's also super important, that we get a good understanding of history, not just a slanted view, but more of an objective view. And clearly, I understand that really all history is going to be a little bit biased, but I think it's important that we get as much information as possible into our children, so that they're able to ascertain like a good understanding of, our history, especially American history. Because again, going back to 2020, that was just a mess. There was so much propaganda that was being thrown at us that I just was not aware of. I had known a lot about what was happening with the CRT world. I don't know if you're familiar with that, with critical race theory and all that stuff. And I understood that. That was actually much thanks to Vodi Bakum, who was an amazing man. He was incredible. Yeah. But yeah, so I was a little bit aware of that, but I didn't realize the extent, I guess, of how deep everything was going, and how and even in history, I know even with our oldest daughter, I was always. I didn't even know exactly how to even answer her, but I remember her saying once, capitalism isn't the best way of running things. And I honestly, I didn't even think, oh, that's a red flag. And now, of course, I would know, okay, well, what's the alternative to capitalism? Yeah. And, but I wasn't even equipped to form the question. And so now I'm aware of it. And now I'm so thankful that although 2020 was hard, it really uncovered a lot of things. And I think it's just made me aware that we need to educate ourselves, like not just our children, but also, the parents and the families, in order to be able to teach our children, in a way that honors the Lord. Really, it's all up to our goal is to honor God, right? That's the Westminster Catechism, right? Why we're here is to honor God and enjoy Him forever, and bring Him joy. And so that's how I think one way to do that is just by educating ourselves and by reading great books and having our kids really read really good books that you don't have to worry about. So
I think that you bring up a really good point, because this is what I have found most parents just kind of going along with the flow, getting along. Like maybe they don't spend a lot of time on media, but
Hmm.
so they don't realize what the ideas that their kids are taking in, and
Yes.
they don't even realize that they're being sort of indoctrinated into, let's just say, like socialism type of
Yes.
ideas through books, through online media, through the public school system, through all of these things. So what I love that you're doing in the sense of creating like a curated bookstore for Christian parents, again, not all have to be gospel, but being able to say these are actually still fitting within your biblical worldview. So these can fit your nightly readings. And it
Yes.
doesn't have to be necessarily all, about Jesus all of the time, but there's so much
Yes.
good character that can be told and taught through storytelling.
Yes, absolutely. Like that's what that and that's the whole point is that, obviously I think it's important that we teach our kids about Christ, but I also want to teach our kids about other things that because all truth is ultimately God's truth anyway.
Yeah.
So when we're teaching our kids good stuff, it's like, wow, that's a reflection of who Jesus is and we can talk that through and teach our kids through that. But yeah, I just don't think right now I mean I will walk through I just out of curiosity I'll walk through the book section in Target, for example, and it amazes me what's out there. I mean, the it's just it's so subtle. You can't even tell often from the front cover, but you flip through and it's definitely trying to normalize a lot of things that shouldn't be normalized and just having and our kids wouldn't be able to articulate what's wrong. Like, wait a second,
Right.
that
Exactly.
they may be able to see, say, huh, that's weird, but they wouldn't really say anything. They would just sort of roll with it and accept it. And I think that's a problem, and that's why I think it's important that we are very careful about what our kids are exposed to. And obviously when they're very young, but even as they get older, I think it's important that we're vetting the books. And again, that's exactly what we've done. Is like literally every book we've gone through and vetted. And how that vetting process goes is that will often a lot of the books have been that we've taken off of different book lists, whether that's homeschooling book lists or classical homeschooler book lists and stuff like that. But also, if there are random books that someone recommends, what we normally do is honestly is just go through Amazon or Goodreads and I look at the 1-star ratings and I'll say, they're trying to say something that there are red flags here. It's not just like the book came in and the cover was ripped off or something silly like that, but there's an actual problem that they may not even be explicit. So often they are explicit about what the problems are, but it's helpful to go through and to look at a lot of those reviews. That's what I've often done. And like if I'm not sure, obviously if I'm familiar with the book, then it just is added or not added or whatever. But that vetting process is just going through and just making sure that it's a good book, that it's not anything that's going to be undermining our values as believers.
That's awesome. And do your kids at all help vet books?
They do. I've had them read a couple books and they'll give me the thumbs up or the thumbs down, like, oh, this one's not very good, or they really love certain books. It depends. It's funny because my boys are definitely not as they go through cycles of like they read a ton and then
Mhm.
they don't read so much. But yeah, my girls have been very, very helpful. Actually, my 16, she's almost 17 now. She was the one who first brought to my attention the Wings of Fire series, because that was one
Oh, yeah.
I had no idea, and they loved them. And they were reading through, and I remember her saying, "Mom, is this what I think it is?" And I looked, I was like, "It sure is." And that's
That's so
okay.
funny. I had allowed my younger kids to read Wings of Fire series as well, but now every time it comes up, every Christian mom and now we're all talking about it because we've all been made aware, of the subtle LGBTQ messages that
Yeah.
are in these dragons books about dragons.
There's a
So
few. There are actually a few, like Dragon Masters. That's a set of books that I wasn't familiar with. But then when I looked it up, I mean, there must be like 30 or something in the series, but it's not until book 21. That's what's crazy is
yeah,
that you're reading all of these books and then they introduce something, and for no reason. It adds nothing to the story, but it's the normalization. They're trying to normalize things and just make it so that your kids just accept it. Like it's not
exactly.
no big deal. And so that's a huge problem. And yeah. So
And I'll add just a little personal story just because I think it will help parents as well to think about why they need your service. So we are raising our 7-year-old granddaughter during the week. And so we, of course, are the ones who are reading to her every night. And so we have some of the Amelia Bedelia books. We've been reading those, which we love and they're great. And I saw that those were all listed on your website as kind of, approved ones. Well, I was at Half Price Books and I saw the books of like Ivy and Bean. And I thought, oh, I remember, one of my older daughters reading those as a kid. And, I thought, oh, they're fine. So I picked them up because they were just a couple bucks. And within the first like chapter or two, it talked about like just really vindictive kind of behavior, like towards a sibling, like really evil, spitting on someone. And then the next day, don't you know it? My granddaughter spit on someone. And I was like, pull these books. This
wow.
this is not going to work. And so it was so subtle. It wasn't that it was against the biblical worldview, but how they talk about character and how they resolve problems when it's children
Yeah. Yeah.
interacting with one another inside of a story has such a great impact on how our children begin to process, how they react and engage with in their own relationships. So
Yeah.
it is really important to have a service like yours, especially if you don't have the time to do the research, to do the vetting. That's kind of like me on media and technology. No one has the time to research every app and whatnot. So I kind of do what I can to prep parents. And so you're doing that on the book end, which is great
Right.
because you can save parents so much time.
Yeah, for sure. And we actually have a service. It's called the Family Book Savings Club. And so if a family wants to have, we have it so that you can have like picture books, chapter books, or middle school, high school, and then young adults. But so depending on how old your kids are, or if even you want a subscription, you can depending on if you have one subscription, it's 10% off of your monthly price. And then if you have two, it's 15% off, and three or more, you get 20% off. So it's an increasing discount on the membership. And yeah, it's obviously all the books have been vetted, and it's just a great, it saves you so much time, because then
Yeah.
you just get the books come in. And if you have like a voracious reader, it's just helpful to have something that's coming in and you don't have to worry about it. It's just there and the kids can read it. And yeah, so that's something that I think could be really valuable for a lot of families.
And what you know, and I know, and other parents may know, but they just forget is if you don't allow the media and you only give them books, when they are bored, they will read.
Yes. Yeah.
They will read. And they may say, I don't like to read or whatever. But if that's their only option, I've heard so many parents of like late elementary, middle school, like, oh, I just pulled the plug and no more TV, no more YouTube. I literally just set books down. And don't you know it? They read them all.
Yeah. And what helps too is that I know I have a few reluctant readers, and they will sit and listen to you read. That is
Yes.
something that I found to be such a blessing, because, my one son, he is in third grade and he does not like reading. I mean, he'll be forced to read, and he'll do it, but he's never super happy about it. But he will sit and listen for
Mm-hmm.
hours to my husband read to him or me read to him. And that's also a really great way to be able to get those stories into their hearts, is just to be, just to sit, and it takes time. And it sort of stinks, because that's a one super convenient thing about screens, is that you don't have to worry about it, right? I mean, quote
It's not
unquote,
you
yeah,
doing it.
right. It's not you doing it. So they're sort of out of your hair, but it's not, but you're just creating a problem that it's like you're kicking the can, that you're probably going to have to deal with something later. So, but yeah, either way, just as long as they're reading something, I think is,
Yeah.
is wonderful. So,
Yeah, early on in my parenting journey, someone had shared with me just the importance of read aloud. And I would say that helped really form a deep relationship with my kids that I was adopting. Is they didn't have the skills to read on their own. They missed out on so
Right.
much early childhood learning in that regard, and they weren't read to ever as babies and as toddlers. But I would just sit there and read, and they would listen, and I think it was just a time of bonding for us. So I definitely encourage. It's a self-sacrifice. You know,
Hmm.
it's kind of exhausting to sit there and read out loud and make sure they're paying attention and use different voices and stuff. But man, it is a gift. Yes. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, for sure.
And I love, I was just on your website when you mentioned the Family Book Savings Club. I love your tagline, by the way, rooted in conviction, curated with care.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is awesome. And that's what parents can find when they come to your website is you are clearly very theologically sound. You know what you're doing. You know, you've done the research, you're doing the vetting of these books, and that can bring such a great benefit to Christian families.
Yeah, I mean that's what I hope to. That's the goal. Is just helping to empower parents and to help them to be able, honestly, just to navigate what's happening right now. Because unfortunately, that's something else that a lot of churches don't want to talk about. A lot of the stuff that's happening right now, and so how in the world do we expect Christian families to know what to do?
Mhm.
And some are just completely unaware, like we had talked about earlier, is that they may not even be aware that there's a problem because we're all very, very busy. And so this is my way of just trying to help parents and help families just to be able to have stuff that they know is good and that can help them, and to, especially parents, to be able to say, okay, look, this is this is happening whether we like it or not, and this is how we need to think about it, think it through, and how to approach it if it comes, if any of that stuff comes into your family, whether that's like pro-life issues, or whether that's gender identity, and all of those hot button issues that, whether or not we like it, we have to talk about it. And like I said, it just stinks that unfortunately the church, I can't tell you how frustrating that's been, at least personally for me, is that, it's great to get very sound biblical teaching. I think that's wonderful, and it's obviously very important. But I think it's also important that we are understanding how to approach the culture, and that's lacking in many churches. And I think it's just something that needs to be addressed. And this is a great way to address it, and just to be able to understand, because it's I think it's awful. I mean, when I think of myself, when my daughter brought up, that capitalism isn't necessarily that great of a thing. A lot of people have suffered. It's like, well, how do you even have the words to respond to that? And I didn't. And that's part of the reason why I did this. So
Yeah. And I think it's great because it's important for us as Christians and in the body of Christ as a whole to support other Christians and small businesses versus these big conglomerates, big tech, all of these companies who really are working against our values.
yes,
And,
yeah,
while we may not ever, move away completely from Amazon because there are some things that we just may need next
yes,
day, books are something that we can plan for. We can in advance know that our kids are going to need to read
for sure,
constantly on a
yes,
regular basis. And so this is definitely something that we can, instead of supporting and giving our money to Amazon, support a Christian business who
yes.
shares the same values as us. So Michelle, go ahead and direct people where they can learn more and find Mudhead Mama, all of those
Okay.
things.
Yeah. So the best way is, everything is Mudhead Mama. So we made it really easy, and how you spell it, because Mama you can spell 500 different ways. So it's MUDHENMAMA.com, or if you go onto Facebook, Instagram, those are the two social media worlds that I'm in, and yeah, it's just Mudhead Mama. So yeah, and
Okay. So
my name is it would be Michelle Lazor. Like, it's not spelled like a laser gun; it's Lazor. But yeah,
yes. And so families can go to the website. You can shop individually for books. You can sign up for one of their bundles or get like a actual like lists based on their age to kind of pick books.
Yes, exactly. Yes, and it's Mud Hen Mama is just the easiest way to, you'll get to the landing page. There's a button to click if you wanted to check out the Family Book Savings Club, and if you click on the shop button, it brings you to all the different categories of books that that we've broken it out into. And there's also, if you scroll down, you'll see book bundles, the link to the book bundles, or even like historical books or biographies, autobiographies, all that stuff. So it should be fairly easy to navigate. And,
Yes.
if you have any questions, you can always email me. I respond very quickly. It's Michelle@mudhenmama.com.
Awesome. And you are offering our Brave Parenting listeners a discount,
Yes,
which is
ma'am.
awesome.
So
Thank
it's
you so much.
and it'll be great for Christmas shopping. So if
Yes.
there are any gifts that need to be purchased for any readers or even non-readers, because some of the books they're just really fun, a lot of them. But it's Brave Parenting, so 2 different words, Brave Parenting, and you'll get 10% off your purchase.
That is awesome. And I just want to reiterate that it is not just children's books. If you want to shop for someone, some other Christian in your life, a brother or sister, friend, small group leader, there are also books on there for adults as well that
Yes,
you can
there
get
are
that all fit into the
amazing.
theme.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was just going to say they're amazing books. Like there's so many great stories on there. I could just go on and on about it. So yeah, I would love for you guys to just check it out. I mean, there are lots of books on parenting, but there's also stuff on just history or like I've mentioned many times, like the CRT, critical race theory, how to approach it from a biblical worldview, or even pro-life books, and it's just a lot of different things that I know I feel very passionately about. But
Yes.
as well as the children's books, so we try to cover
Yeah.
everything. So
That's great. That's great. So I really do encourage everyone to go to mudhemmama.com and do your book shopping there for the holidays. Get all of your people books. Even if you don't think that they want books, books is always my default gift. Every baby shower, every birthday, it is books because you can never have too many. And they can
Yes.
always be re-gifted after you've read them. So it's a wonderful thing. So Michelle, thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Until next time, go and be brave.